What would you do if in the middle of an ordinary day you stumbled upon someone fighting for their life? Um, would you freeze, unsure of what to do? Or would you rise to the occasion and try to make a difference even in the odds were stacked against you? Before we begin this incredible story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. We'd love to hear from you. And if stories that inspire and challenge your perspective are your thing, make sure to subscribe for more. Now, let's set the stage. On a quiet evening, the world moved along as usual. People hurried home, lights flickered on in small houses, and the sounds of everyday life filled the air. Somewhere along a lonely street, a nurse walked back from her shift. Her day had been long and exhausting. Her uniform, once pristine, now bore the stains of her endless work. But what she carried was not just physical fatigue. Her struggles went deeper, bills piled high at home, and dreams she once had felt farther away with each passing day. That evening, though, was about to take an unexpected turn. As she turned the corner, she noticed something unusual. A small crowd had gathered, but no one seemed to know what to do. In the center of it all lay a boy, fragile and unmoving. Panic filled the air, but not a single person stepped forward to help. The boy's life hung by a thread, and time was slipping away. This nurse, a woman who already had so little to give, found herself faced with a decision that could change not only her life, but someone else's forever. She didn't know who this boy was or how he had ended up there. She didn't know what dangers lay ahead or what consequences her actions might bring. But in that moment, none of it mattered. What happened next is a tale of resilience, sacrifice, and humanity at its purest. It's a reminder that sometimes, even when life feels heavy and unfair, a single act of kindness can ripple far beyond what we imagine. So, stay with us as we take you through an extraordinary journey, one that will leave you questioning what you would do in the face of such a challenge. This is the story of a poor nurse, a dying boy, and the night their worlds collided in the most unexpected way. Imagine a small, tightly knit community where life moved at a modest pace. The town was far from the bustling cities, with narrow streets lined by rows of aging brick houses. Children played barefoot on dusty roads, laughter mingling with the occasional sounds of bicycle bells and distant conversations. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and secrets were scarce. Amidst this simple backdrop lived someone who was anything but ordinary. Her name was Alicia. At 28, she was a nurse whose heart was as resilient as it was kind. Life had been anything but easy for her, yet she carried herself with quiet strength. Alicia lived in a small rented apartment, barely large enough to hold her modest belongings. The chipped walls and squeaky wooden floors spoke of years of wear, but she kept the place spotless. A few pictures adorned the walls, reminders of the family she had left behind. Each morning, Alicia's day began before the sun had fully risen. The alarm clock on her nightstand buzzed faintly, and she'd stir from the thin mattress that served as her bed. Her first stop was always the tiny kitchen, where she brewed a cup of tea in a battered steel pot. The aroma of ginger and cardamom filled the air as she sipped slowly, savoring a brief moment of calm before the chaos of the day unfolded. Her uniform, carefully ironed the night before, hung on a hook by the door. It was white and crisp, a stark contrast to the dullness of her surroundings. Alicia took pride in her work, and it showed in the way she prepared for her shift. Once dressed, she would glance at the mirror, her dark eyes reflecting both exhaustion and determination. Her curly black hair was tied neatly into a bun, and her warm brown skin glowed faintly in the morning light. Alicia's commute to work was a journey in itself. She walked to the bus stop, her shoes worn but sturdy, weaving through the bustling morning crowd. Vendors set up stalls along the street, their calls mixing with the hum of traffic. She'd often pass by a group of children on their way to school, their laughter sounding through the emptiness in the suburban bakery down the street. The hospital where Alicia worked was understaffed and overburdened. It wasn't uncommon for her to work 12-hour shifts with barely a moment to rest. Yet, despite the challenges, she treated every patient with the same level of care and compassion. Her colleagues admired her dedication, often joking that she could find the energy to smile even after the toughest days. What set Alicia apart was her unwavering sense of duty. One evening, a frail elderly woman had arrived at the hospital struggling to pay for her medication. Without hesitation, Alicia had reached into her own pocket, offering whatever little she had to help. It was these small acts of kindness that defined her. She believed that even the smallest gesture could make a difference in someone's life. At home, Alicia's life was simple. Her evenings were spent reading borrowed books or talking on the phone with her younger brother, who still lived in their hometown. Their conversations were often light-hearted, but beneath the laughter was a shared understanding of the struggles they both faced. Alicia had taken on the role of a caretaker for her family after their parents had passed, and even from afar, she continued to support them. There were few people in Alicia's life who truly understood the weight she carried. Her closest friend Priya was one of them. Priya, a fellow nurse, often stopped by after their shifts to share a meal and talk about everything from work to their dreams of a better future. It was during these conversations that Alicia's vulnerability showed. She spoke of her desire to continue her education, to become a doctor someday. But those dreams felt distant, overshadowed by the financial burdens that seemed to grow heavier each day. Still, Alicia never let her circumstances define her. She was a firm believer in the idea that hard work and kindness could pave the way to something better. Her patients often remarked on how she made them feel seen, cared for, and valued, even in the most trying times. Alicia's life, though modest, was filled with purpose. Every day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to make a difference. She wasn't wealthy or powerful, but her spirit was unyielding. She carried herself with grace, a quiet reminder that strength isn't always loud or visible. It's found in the small, consistent acts of love and care that often go unnoticed. It was this same strength that would soon be put to the ultimate test. What lay ahead would challenge everything Alicia believed in, forcing her to confront fears she had buried deep within herself. Little did she know, her journey was about to intersect with that of a young boy whose life depended on her courage. The events that followed would not only test her resolve, but also redefine what it meant to truly make a difference. Imagine walking home after a long day, your mind weighed down by exhaustion and the familiar worries of life. The air is still, the streetlights flicker faintly, and the sound of your footsteps echoes softly in the night. Suddenly, a piercing cry shatters the silence, startling you from your thoughts. Would you stop, or would you keep walking, telling yourself it's not your responsibility? That was exactly the moment Alicia found herself in. She had just finished another grueling shift at the hospital, her body aching and her mind craving the solitude of her small apartment. As she turned the corner toward the quieter part of her route, the sound came again, sharp, desperate, and unmistakably filled with fear. Her heart quickened, a rush of adrenaline cutting through her fatigue. Alicia paused, scanning the dimly lit street ahead. At first, she saw nothing but shadows and the faint outline of parked cars. Then she noticed a small crowd gathered near the edge of the road, their murmurs mixing with the faint rustling of leaves. Something about the scene felt wrong. People stood frozen, their faces tense, yet no one moved to help. As she approached, the sight before her made her stomach drop. Lying motionless on the ground was a young boy, no older than 8 or 9. His small frame looked fragile under the harsh glow of a nearby streetlight. His chest rose and fell unevenly, his breaths shallow and labored. A streak of blood ran down the side of his face, matting his hair and staining the collar of his shirt. "What happened?" Alicia's voice cut through the murmurs as she knelt beside the boy. Her training kicked in, and she reached for his wrist, feeling for a pulse. It was faint, but steady. The man from the crowd stepped forward, his voice shaky. I think he was hit by a car. It drove off before anyone could stop it. Alicia's mind raced. The boy needed immediate medical attention, but the nearest hospital was miles away. She looked around, her eyes searching for someone, anyone who could help. "Did anyone call an ambulance?" she asked, her tone sharp. There was an awkward silence. A woman mumbled something about not having a phone, while another person avoided her gaze. Frustration bubbled up in Alicia. Time was slipping away, and the boy's condition was deteriorating. Without hesitation, she made a decision. "We can't wait. Someone help me lift him. I'll take him myself." A young man stepped forward hesitantly, helping her carefully lift the boy into her arms. Alicia's heart ached as she felt how light he was, his small body limp against her. She hurried to the side of the road, flagging down the first car she saw. The driver, an older woman, rolled down her window, her expression a mix of concern and reluctance. "Please," Alicia pleaded, her voice breaking slightly. "This boy needs help. I need to get him to the hospital." The woman hesitated for a moment, then nodded, unlocking the car doors. Alicia climbed into the back seat, cradling the boy as the car sped toward the hospital. The minutes felt like hours, each second stretching endlessly as she watched his shallow breathing. "Hang in there, kid," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. Her thoughts raced with a mix of fear and determination. She couldn't let him die, not like this. When they finally arrived, Alicia didn't wait for help. She carried the boy into the emergency room, her voice firm and urgent as she called for assistance. Nurses and doctors rushed to her side, taking the boy from her arms and disappearing into the treatment area. For the first time since the incident began, Alicia allowed herself to breathe. Her hands trembled as she sank into a nearby chair, her mind replaying the events of the past hour. She felt a wave of guilt for the crowd that had hesitated to act, and a deep anger at the driver who had left the boy to die. But more than anything, she felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. As the minutes passed, the gravity of the situation began to sink in. Who was this boy? Did he have family who had come searching for him? And what if she hadn't been there? The questions swirled in her mind, each one more unsettling than the last. A nurse approached, breaking her thoughts. "He's stable for now, but we're running more tests. It's a good thing you got him here when you did." Relief washed over Alicia, though it was tinged with unease. The boy was alive, but his fight wasn't over yet. And deep down, she knew this was just the beginning of something much larger than she could have anticipated. What would you do in a moment like this? Would you have the courage to step in when no one else would? For Alicia, there was no other choice. But little did she know, her act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. The boy, now lying in a hospital bed, looked peaceful compared to the chaos of earlier. But the relief Alicia had felt was short-lived. The reality of the situation began to unravel, revealing complications she hadn't anticipated. The first obstacle came quickly. The hospital administrator approached Alicia as she sat outside the boy's room, her head resting in her hands. His tone was curt, his expression severe. "Miss, I understand you brought this child in, but he's unregistered. We need consent from a guardian or family member to proceed further with treatment. Do you know how to contact them?" Alicia's stomach dropped. She hadn't thought about the boy's identity in the rush to save his life. She shook her head. I found him on the street. No one around knew who he was. Isn't there anything we can do in the meantime?" The administrator sighed, his voice lowering but no less firm. "We've stabilized him for now, but without someone to take responsibility for his care, we can only do so much. This hospital is already stretched thin." Frustration boiled inside her. The boy's life hung in the balance and bureaucracy was standing in the way. "I'll take responsibility," she blurted out, the words escaping before she had time to think them through. The administrator raised an eyebrow. "That's a significant commitment. Are you sure you're prepared for the financial and legal implications?" Alicia hesitated. She had barely enough to keep herself afloat. Taking on this responsibility would mean sacrifices she wasn't sure she could make. But then she glanced at the boy through the window. His fragile form stirred something deep within her. A memory of her younger brother, of promises she had made to herself to always stand up for those in need. "I'll figure it out," she said firmly. The decision was only the beginning. Over the next few days, the challenges mounted. The hospital bills began to pile up, each one a stark reminder of the cost of saving a life. Alicia worked double shifts, often skipping meals to save money. Her body ached from exhaustion, but her resolve didn't waver. But the external obstacles weren't the only battles she faced. Doubts crept into her mind during quiet moments. Had she made the right choice? What if she couldn't keep up with the financial strain? And what if the boy's family, if they ever came forward, accused her of overstepping? These thoughts weighed heavily on her, yet she kept them to herself, unwilling to burden anyone else with her fears. Her closest friend Priya noticed the change. One evening, as they shared a hurried meal during their shift, Priya broke the silence. "Alicia, you've been pushing yourself too hard. What's going on?" Alicia hesitated, unsure of how to explain. Finally, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper, "It's the boy I brought in. I couldn't just leave him, but now everything feels so overwhelming." Priya placed a comforting hand on Alicia's arm. "You've always had a big heart, but you don't have to do this alone. Let me help." Alicia shook her head. "I can't drag you into this. It's my choice, my responsibility." Priya's eyes softened. "Sometimes strength means knowing when to ask for help. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, least of all to yourself." Even with Priya's encouragement, Alicia found herself facing yet another challenge. A man claiming to be the boy's uncle showed up at the hospital. His demeanor was aggressive, his demands loud and unsettling. "I want to take him home," he insisted, glaring at the staff. "He's my nephew. He belongs with me." Alicia, standing nearby, felt a surge of protective instinct. Something about the man felt off. His disheveled appearance and slurred speech raised red flags. When asked for identification, he grew defensive, refusing to provide proof of his relationship to the boy. The hospital staff turned to Alicia, seeking her input. She stepped forward, her voice steady but firm. "Until we can verify who you are, the boy stays here. His safety comes first." The man's glare deepened. "Who do you think you are? You're just a nurse. You don't get to make decisions like this." Alicia felt her heart race, but she stood her ground. "I may just be a nurse, but I care about what happens to him. Unless you can prove he's better off with you, I won't let him leave." The confrontation left Alicia shaken, but it also reinforced her determination. She realized that saving the boy wasn't just about medical care. It was about protecting him from a world that had already failed him once. As days turned into weeks, Alicia became more involved in the boy's recovery. She learned that his name was Malik, piecing together fragments of his story from the few words he mumbled when he was awake. He spoke of a home he couldn't return to, of a mother who was no longer around. The details were sparse, but they painted a picture of a life filled with hardship. One evening, as Alicia sat by Malik's bedside, he opened his eyes and looked at her. His voice was weak, but clear. "Why are you helping me?" The question caught her off guard. She thought for a moment before answering. "Because someone once helped me when I needed it most, and because you deserve a chance to get better, no matter what." Malik's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, Alicia saw a glimmer of trust. But just as things seemed to stabilize, another blow came. The hospital administration informed Alicia that Malik's care would need to be transferred unless she could secure a sponsor or additional funding. And the weight of the situation threatened to crush her, but she refused to give up. She reached out to local charities, community leaders, and even set up a fundraiser among her colleagues. The response was modest but hardening. People who had little to give offered what they could, inspired by her dedication. Through it all, Alicia's internal struggle persisted. She wrestled with the fear of failure, the nagging voice that told her she wasn't enough. But each time she looked at Malik, she found the strength to push forward. Do you think Alicia should give up or keep fighting? For her, the answer was clear. She couldn't turn back, not when a young life depended on her. And though the road ahead was uncertain, she knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't let Malik face it alone. Just when it seemed like things were finally stabilizing, Alicia received news that shattered the fragile sense of progress she had worked so hard to build. It started with a phone call from a social worker who had been contacted about Malik's case. "Miss Alicia?" The woman's voice was calm but firm. "I need to inform you that someone has come forward claiming to be Malik's father. He's requesting custody." Alicia's heart sank. She had known this moment might come, but it didn't make the news any easier to hear. "Did he provide any proof?" she asked. Her voice steadied despite the wave of anxiety washing over her. "Yes," the social worker replied. "He presented documentation, including Malik's birth certificate. Everything appears to be legitimate. We're arranging a meeting to discuss the next steps, but this could mean Malik will be leaving the hospital soon." The words hit Alicia like a blow. For weeks, she had been Malik's lifeline, his advocate, and his protector. The thought of handing him over to a stranger, even if that stranger was his biological father, filled her with dread. The next day, the meeting was set. Alicia found herself sitting in a small, sterile office, across from a man who introduced himself as Malik's father, Imran. He was well-dressed and polite, but there was something about his demeanor that felt rehearsed. His words were carefully chosen, his tone measured. "I've been searching for Malik since his mother passed away," Imran explained, his expression somber. "I didn't know where he was until I heard about the accident. I want to take him home and give him the life he deserves." Alicia listened intently, her instincts on high alert. Something about his story didn't sit right. "If you've been looking for him, why didn't you report him missing? Why wasn't there any record of your search?" she asked, her voice firm but respectful. Imran hesitated for a fraction of a second before responding. It's complicated. I didn't have the resources at the time, and there were personal matters I had to resolve." The explanation felt hollow, but legally, Alicia had no grounds to challenge his claim. Still, her gut told her something was wrong. Later that evening, as she sat by Malik's bedside, she decided to gently broach the subject. "Malik, do you remember your father?" she asked, her tone soft and reassuring. Malik's eyes widened with fear, and he shook his head vigorously. "I don't want to go with him," he whispered, his voice trembling. Alicia's heart ached at the sight of his fear. "Why, Malik? Did something happen?" Tears welled up in his eyes, and he clutched the blanket tightly. "He hurt Mama," he said quietly. "He used to yell and break things. I don't want to go back." The revelation hit Alicia like a tidal wave. Malik's father wasn't just an absent parent. He was a source of trauma. The thought of sending Malik back into that environment was unbearable. But how could she stop it? Legally, Imran had every right to take his son. Alicia knew she couldn't do this alone. She reached out to Priya, sharing everything Malik had told her. "There has to be a way to protect him," Alicia said, her voice heavy with desperation. Priya, ever the practical one, suggested consulting a lawyer. "If we can prove that Malik's father is unfit, the court might intervene, but we'll need evidence." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Alicia dug into Imran's background, enlisting the help of Priya and a few trusted colleagues. What they discovered was both shocking and validating. Imran had a history of domestic violence, with several police reports filed by Malik's mother. Though none had led to a conviction, the pattern was clear. Armed with this information, Alicia approached a social worker. "This man cannot take Malik," she said firmly, handing over the evidence. "He's a danger to his son." The social worker frowned as she reviewed the documents. "This complicates things," she admitted, "but it doesn't guarantee a court will rule against him. You'll need to testify, and Malik may need to as well." The thought of putting Malik through that ordeal made Alicia's stomach churn. He had already endured so much, but she knew it was their best chance to keep him safe. When the day of the hearing arrived, Alicia felt a mix of fear and determination. She stood before the judge, recounting everything she had learned and everything Malik had told her. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she held onto the papers that detailed Imran's past. Imran, seated across the room, maintained his calm facade, but Alicia could see the cracks forming. When questioned about the reports, his answers were evasive, his confidence faltering. Malik's testimony was the most heart-wrenching part of the day. Sitting in the witness chair, his small frame seemed even smaller under the weight of the moment. With tears streaming down his face, he recounted the nights filled with yelling and the fear he felt every time his father's temper flared. By the end of the hearing, the judge ruled in Malik's favor. Imran's custody claim was denied, and Malik was placed under the care of the state, with Alicia acting as his temporary guardian until a more permanent solution could be arranged. The relief Alicia felt was overwhelming, but it was bittersweet. The ordeal had taken a toll on her, both emotionally and physically. Yet, as she walked out of the courthouse with Malik by her side, she knew she had done the right thing. How would you react if faced with a sudden twist like this? For Alicia, the revelation about Imran had changed everything. It forced her to confront her own fears, to fight harder than she ever thought possible. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, she knew one thing for sure. Malik's safety was worth every sacrifice. Placement in her temporary care was a fragile solution, one that could be upended at any moment. The weight of that temporary care was a fragile solution, one that could be upended at any moment. The weight of that transport balloon rumbled all eternity through looms in lowing caution. The pressing experience has spoilt all the fun, and I'm disappointed in myself. Breathe easy. Just remember. The first major challenge came from the hospital administration. Malik's continued stay in the facility was becoming an issue. "We've done everything we can medically," the administrator explained during a tense meeting. "But without long-term guardianship or sponsorship, he can't remain here indefinitely." Alicia's heart sank. She had no legal claim over Malik beyond her temporary role, and the idea of him being placed in a foster system where he might face further neglect or harm was unbearable. Yet, keeping him under her care meant stepping into uncharted territory. That night, as she sat by Malik's bedside, the boy looked up at her with wide, trusting eyes. "Will you leave me too?" he asked softly, his voice trembling with fear. The question cut through her like a knife. She took a deep breath, fighting back tears. "No, Malik, I'm here for you. I promise." But even as she made the promise, doubts crept in. Could she really give him the stability he needed? Her small apartment, her meager income, her already overburdened life, none of it seemed enough. The next day she began exploring options. She spoke to social workers, community leaders, and even a lawyer Priya had recommended. Each conversation brought new obstacles. The legal process to gain guardianship was daunting, requiring resources and time she didn't have. Worse, it meant opening her life to scrutiny, revealing every financial struggle and personal vulnerability. Alicia wrestled with the decision. Would fighting for Malik's guardianship truly serve his best interests? Or was she letting her emotions cloud her judgment? Late at night, as she sat alone in her apartment, these thoughts consumed her. She found herself questioning everything. "Am I doing this for him or for me?" she whispered into the silence. "What if I fail him?" The stress began to take its toll. Alicia's once crisp uniform now felt heavier on her shoulders. The long shifts at the hospital became grueling marathons, each day blending into the next. Her colleagues noticed the change, and Priya was the first to confront her. "You're burning out, Alicia," Priya said one evening as they cleaned up after a particularly chaotic shift. "You can't keep this up. You need help." Alicia shook her head. "If I don't fight for him, who will? He's just a kid, Priya. He doesn't deserve to be tossed around like he doesn't matter." Priya placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have the biggest heart of anyone I know, but you can't save him by destroying yourself. Let me help you. Let us help you." Despite her exhaustion, Alicia refused to give up. She began working extra shifts, putting every penny she earned into a fund for Malik's future. She reached out to local charities, hoping for support. Some responded with small donations, while others offered only sympathetic words. As the days turned into weeks, another challenge emerged. Malik's father, Imran, reappeared, this time with a lawyer of his own. "I won't let you take my son away from me," he declared during a heated exchange at the hospital. The threat was real. Imran's lawyer argued that the court ruling was temporary and that Imran had a right to reclaim custody if he could prove he had reformed. Alicia's lawyer warned her that the legal battle could drag on for months, if not years. In the midst of this turmoil, Alicia faced a moral dilemma. An anonymous source offered her information that could destroy Imran's credibility, a series of financial records and personal details that painted him in a deeply unfavorable light. Using it would almost certainly tip the scales in her favor, but it felt like crossing a line. Priya, ever the voice of reason, urged caution. If you use this, it could backfire. The courts might see it as an invasion of privacy, and it could hurt your case more than help it. But Alicia couldn't ignore the opportunity. Late one night, she sat with the documents spread out before her, the weight of the decision pressing heavily on her chest. What if this is the only way to protect him, she thought. The inner conflict was overwhelming. Alicia prided herself on doing what was right, on standing up for others without compromising her values. But this situation was different. The stakes were higher, the consequences more severe. Ultimately, she decided to trust the legal process, even if it meant risking everything. The next court hearing was a turning point. Malik's testimony, though painful, was powerful. He spoke of the fear he felt in his father's presence, of the nights spent hiding while his mother tried to shield him. The judge listened intently, her expression unreadable. When the ruling finally came, it was a partial victory. Imran's custody claim was denied again, but Malik was placed in the care of the state until a permanent solution could be found. The decision was bittersweet. Alicia felt a sense of relief that Malik wouldn't be returning to his father, but the thought of him being placed in a foster system filled her with dread. After the hearing, Malik clung to her, his small hands gripping her arm tightly. "Please don't let them take me," he pleaded, his voice filled with desperation. Alicia knelt beside him, her own tears threatening to spill over. "I'm not going anywhere, Malik. I'll do everything I can to make sure you're safe." The journey was far from over. Alicia knew there would be more battles ahead, more obstacles to overcome. But as she looked into Malik's eyes, she found a renewed sense of purpose. Would you make the same choice if you were in her shoes? Alicia had risked everything for a child who had no one else. And though the road ahead was uncertain, she knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't give up, no matter what it took. The hearing room was tense, the air heavy with anticipation. Alicia sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands clasped tightly together to hide their trembling. Across from her was Imran, his lawyer flipping through a thick stack of documents with a confidence that made Alicia's stomach turn. This was the moment everything had been building toward, the final battle for Malik's future. The stakes had never been higher. Imran was back with a stronger case, bolstered by new claims that he had turned his life around. His lawyer painted a picture of a repentant father, a man deserving of a second chance. "My client has completed anger management courses, secured stable employment, and is fully prepared to provide Malik with a safe and loving home," the lawyer declared, his voice ringing with conviction. Alicia's lawyer, a kind but firm woman named Mira, leaned toward her. "Stay calm," she whispered. "We have the truth on our side." The truth. That was what Alicia clung to, even as doubt gnawed at her resolve. Malik sat beside her, his small hand clutching hers for reassurance. She could feel his fear, his unspoken plea for protection. It was a weight she carried willingly, but it was also a reminder of how much was at stake. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing, turned her attention to Alicia. Miss Alicia, as Malik's temporary guardian, you've been closely involved in his care. What do you believe is in his best interest and why? Taking a deep breath, Alicia rose to her feet. Her voice was steady, though her heart raced. Your Honor, I've spent weeks caring for Malik. I've seen his fear, his pain, and his resilience. He's been through more than any child should ever have to face. Malik has told me about the abuse he witnessed, the trauma he endured, and his fear of returning to that environment. I'm not here to condemn his father. I'm here to protect Malik. He deserves stability, safety, and a chance to heal. Imran's lawyer stood and countered. Objection, Your Honor. Miss Alicia is speaking emotionally, not factually. Her claims are based on hearsay from a traumatized child. The judge raised a hand, silencing the room. I'll allow it, but let's keep this focused on the evidence. Nira nodded and began presenting their case. She highlighted Imran's history of domestic violence, the police reports, and Malik's own testimony. The evidence was damning, but Imran's lawyer fought back fiercely, questioning every detail and casting doubt wherever he could. As the back and forth continued, Alicia felt her resolve waver. The legal jargon, the constant challenges, it was overwhelming. But then she glanced at Malik, his wide eyes filled with trust. That look reminded her of why she had fought so hard to begin with. When it was Malik's turn to speak, the room fell silent. The boy's voice was small but steady as he recounted his experiences. My dad used to yell a lot. He would throw things, and my mom would cry. I was scared all the time. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of truth. Imran shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his facade cracking ever so slightly. Your Honor, he interrupted, his voice rising. I've changed. That's all in the past. I'm not the same person anymore. The judge fixed him with a piercing stare. If you've changed, why did you wait until now to claim custody? Why not report your son missing immediately after his mother's passing? Imran faltered, his confidence slipping. I didn't know where he was, he stammered. The judge's expression remained unreadable as she turned back to Alisha. Miss Alisha, why should I believe that you, a nurse with limited resources, can provide a better future for this child than his biological father? Alicia met the judge's gaze, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Because I'm not alone, Your Honor. I may not have much, but I have a community behind me. Malik is more than just a responsibility to me. He's family. And family doesn't abandon each other, no matter how hard it gets. Her words hung in the air, the weight of them palpable. For a moment, the room was silent. The judge took a deep breath. Of the kidney. This is not an easy decision. This is extremely difficult. Alicia's heart pounded as the judge continued. While I commend Mr. Imran for his efforts to improve his life, the evidence suggests that his past behavior has caused significant harm. This court cannot, in good conscience, place Malik in an environment where his safety may be compromised. The room was so quiet that Alicia could hear her own breathing. The judge turned to her. Got it to wish my joy. I mean, it's fucking incredible. I'm sorry if I was being... My mind is buzzing. I am granting you temporary custody, pending a review in 6 months to ensure Malik's needs are being met. Tears streamed down Alicia's face as the ruling sank in. She had won, but the victory was bittersweet. The road ahead was still uncertain, filled with challenges she could barely comprehend. As she left the courtroom with Malik by her side, she felt a mixture of relief and determination. The battle wasn't over, but she had taken the first step. Malik's small hand tightened around hers, and she looked down to see a faint smile on his face. "Are we going home now?" he asked softly. Alicia nodded, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within her. "Yes, Malik, we're going home." Would you have made the same sacrifices, taken the same risks to protect someone you barely knew? For Alicia, the answer was clear. Malik's life was worth every battle, every sleepless night, and every ounce of strength she had left to give. The weeks following the courtroom victory were a whirlwind of adjustment, resilience, and quiet triumphs. For the first time in months, Alicia allowed herself to exhale. Though she knew the journey was far from over. Malik was safe, but their new life together brought challenges she hadn't anticipated. Their small apartment, already modest by any standard, now felt even smaller with the addition of a child. Alicia cleared a corner of her living room to set up a makeshift space for Malik. A donated bed, a few colorful blankets, and a second-hand lamp she picked up on her way home from work. It wasn't much, but Malik's wide-eyed excitement made it feel like a palace. "Is this really mine?" he asked, running his hands over the bedspread. Alicia smiled, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and sadness. "It's all yours, Malik. This is your home now." Settling into their new routine wasn't easy. Malik carried the scars of his past, and Alicia often found him staring off into space, his small hands clutching the blanket, as if afraid it might disappear. At night he sometimes woke up crying, haunted by memories of his father's rage. Alicia would sit by his side, holding him close and whispering soothing words until his strength subsided. Her own struggles were no less daunting. Balancing her demanding job with the responsibilities of being a guardian tested her limits daily. There were times when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, but every time she saw Malik's growing smile or heard his laughter, she felt renewed. One evening, as they shared a simple dinner, Malik looked up at her with a shy smile. "I like it here," he said softly. "It feels safe." Those words were worth more to Alicia than any paycheck or accolade. They reminded her of why she had fought so hard and sacrificed so much. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of purpose that went beyond her work at the hospital. The transformation in Alicia was subtle but profound. She had always been compassionate, always willing to go the extra mile for those in need. But Malik's presence in her life taught her something deeper: the power of perseverance and the strength that comes from love. She realized that true courage wasn't about grand gestures or heroic acts. It was about showing up day after day, even when the odds seemed impossible. Her colleagues at the hospital noticed the change. Priya, ever the supportive friend, remarked on it one evening as they walked home together. "You're different now, Alicia," she said with a warm smile. "Stronger, more determined. It's like you found something you didn't know you were looking for." Alicia nodded, a thoughtful look crossing her face. "I think I have. Malik has shown me that even in the darkest moments, there's always a reason to keep going. He's given me more than I could ever give him." The community, too, rallied around them. Neighbors offered hand-me-down clothes and school supplies for Malik, while local charities stepped in to provide financial support. Alicia was deeply moved by their generosity, and it strengthened her belief in the goodness of people. As the months passed, Malik began to thrive. He started attending school, his once shy demeanor giving way to a curiosity and confidence that warmed Alicia's heart. His teachers spoke of his quick wit and his eagerness to learn, and Alicia couldn't help but feel a surge of pride every time she heard his name. One day, Malik brought home a drawing he had made in class. It was a simple picture of a house with two stick figures standing outside, a tall one with curly hair and a small one holding her hand. Beneath it, he had written, "My family." Alicia stared at the drawing for a long time, tears blurring her vision. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words until that moment. Malik wasn't just someone she was caring for. He had become her family, just as much as she had become his. But their journey wasn't without its struggles. The 6-month review loomed on the horizon, a reminder that their time together could still be taken away. Alicia spent countless hours gathering documentation, meeting with social workers, and preparing for the possibility of another legal battle. Through it all, she never let Malik see her fear. She wanted him to feel secure, no matter what. The day of the review finally arrived. Alicia stood before the same judge, her heart pounding in her chest. Malik sat beside her, his small hand clutching hers for reassurance. The social worker presented her findings, detailing Malik's progress and Alicia's unwavering commitment to his well-being. When it was Alicia's turn to speak, she took a deep breath, her voice steady despite the emotion swirling within her. "Your Honor, these past 6 months have been the most challenging and rewarding of my life. Malik has taught me more about strength, resilience, and love than I ever thought possible. He's not just a responsibility to me, he's my family, and I will do whatever it takes to give him the life he deserves." The judge listened intently, her expression unreadable. When the ruling came, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Based on the evidence presented and the significant progress Malik has made under Miss Alicia's care, this court grants her permanent guardianship. Alicia felt the weight lift from her shoulders as relief flooded her body. Tears streamed down her face as she hugged Malik tightly, his laughter ringing in her ears. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that everything would be okay. The aftermath of the ruling brought a sense of peace that Alicia hadn't felt in a long time. Malik settled fully into his new life, thriving in ways she hadn't dared to dream. Alicia herself found a renewed sense of purpose, not just in her role as a guardian, but in her work at the hospital. She began advocating for children in similar situations, using her experience to inspire change. Reflecting on their journey, Alicia realized how far they had both come. She thought about the quiet nurse she had been before Malik entered her life, the woman who had doubted her own strength. That woman was still a part of her, but she had grown into something more, someone who understood that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple out into something extraordinary. What would you have learned from this experience? For Alicia, it was the understanding that true strength lies in vulnerability, in the willingness to fight for what matters, even when the odds seem impossible. Malik had given her that gift, just as much as she had given him a second chance at life. Together they had built something beautiful out of the chaos, a family forged not by blood, but by love and determination. So, what did this journey teach us? At its core, Alicia's story is a testament to the power of resilience, kindness, and the human capacity to rise above even the most daunting challenges. She began as a nurse, living a quiet life, burdened by her own struggles, yet willing to step forward when fate placed a frightened boy in her path. That single act of courage set her on a journey that would transform both her life and his forever. Through every obstacle, the overwhelming hospital bills, the courtroom battles, and the emotional toll of becoming Malik's guardian, Alicia showed us the true meaning of strength. Strength isn't the absence of fear or doubt. It's the ability to move forward despite them. It's the courage to fight for someone else, even when you're unsure of the outcome. Malik, too, became a symbol of hope and resilience. His transformation from a scared, fragile child into a confident, thriving young boy reminds us of the profound impact love and stability can have on a person's life. Together, Alicia and Malik built a family not bound by blood, but by a shared journey of healing and growth. In the end, what we learn is this: the smallest acts of compassion can ripple out to create incredible change. Alicia didn't have wealth or power, but she had a heart big enough to embrace a child who needed her. Her story reminds us that no matter how small we feel in the face of life's challenges, our choices can still make a difference. And this isn't just Alicia's story. It's a call to action for all of us. In a world that often feels divided, we all have the power to extend a hand, to fight for someone who can't fight for themselves, and to stand up for what's right. If you enjoyed this story of perseverance and transformation, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who could use a little inspiration today. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge, uplift, and remind us of what truly matters. Because at the end of the day, it's not about how much we have, but what we're willing to give that defines us. And just like Alicia and Malik, we all have the ability to create something beautiful from life's most difficult moments. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Thank you for watching and being part of this journey with us. Alicia and Malik's story is a powerful reminder that even in the face of adversity, kindness and determination can light the way forward. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts and how it inspired you. And if you know someone who could use a little hope and encouragement today, share this video with them. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We're here to bring you more stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us all of the beauty in humanity. Stay tuned for more incredible tales of courage and transformation. Whether it's a story of resilience, a moment of kindness, or a life-changing journey, there's so much more to explore together. Thank you for being here, and we can't wait to see you again soon. Until then, keep spreading positivity and hope.